proud member of the board, soon to be president, Joe Danishevsky, will be hosting this meeting. So Joe Danishevsky, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Great. Well, Rex, really appreciate your being with us today.
You bet.
And you've been a past guest on our show, and I think everyone knows your wonderful pedigree. And we're really proud of you as a member of the Board of Supervisors. So as far as the election goes, looking at the statewide results, were there any surprises, either pleasantly or not so pleasant?
Well, Joe, thanks for the invitation. I'm appreciative of the chance to be here with all of you today. I'm going to try and steer clear of that dangerous area known as politician acting as pundit. But I do think that we have a lot to celebrate and a lot to reflect on as well. As far as where things stand, I wanted to first ask everybody, if you haven't already done so, please prepare a question about county government and a question about politics that you want to ask me, because I'd much rather spend the bulk of this time engaging in dialogue with all of you than talking at you. But to your question, Joe, I think we really benefited from multi-candidate GOP primaries for governor, United States Senator, Secretary of State, and Attorney General, where in each one of those cases, the victor did not gain a majority of Republican primary votes, but they had something that put them over the top in a multi-candidate field, which was the endorsement from Donald Trump. And so as a result, you had 4 people running for statewide office on their ticket who were extremists, who were election deniers, who were so extraordinarily out of the mainstream of, I think, their own party, that they just were not able to run effective general election campaigns. And probably the 2 most egregious examples were Blake Masters and Blake Masters and Mark Fincham, who were defeated by Mark Kelly and Adrian Fontes, respectively. And certainly both Mark and Adrian had the resources to not only define themselves, but also to effectively define their opponents. And we got some assistance from outside the state for both those campaigns as well. But I think Kari Lake demonstrated that there is a sensible center in not just this country, but this state. And it's not only a sensible center that recoils against election denialism and not being in favor of reproductive rights for women, but it's also a sensible center that just recoils against people who are unpleasant and who just seem like they're going to have a difficult time working with anybody. And I think the tone and tenor of her campaign, especially in the waning days when she decided that she was going to attack John McCain, when she decided she was going to, for some bizarre reason that I guess only she understands, mock the assault on Speaker Pelosi's husband. I just think that there was a core group of voters within the Republican and Democratic parties, but also within the ranks of independents, who just were appalled by that kind of rhetoric. Some other takeaways that I have from the state elections is that, and this might not be a popular opinion, but I'm going to go ahead and say it because it was something that I really worried about. The Republicans in the legislature have eviscerated clean elections, and you just are not playing on a level field if you decide to be a clean elections candidate. And honestly, I think the only people who should be running clean elections in the future are people running for the legislature in pretty safe Democratic districts. But I think that's the biggest reason we lost the state superintendent of public instruction race, because Kathy Hoffman just did not have the resources to compete against somebody who not only was running traditional and could raise more money than she did, but who had been on a state ballot multiple times as a candidate for not just state superintendent of public instruction, but also for attorney general. So that was a big takeaway that I had. Another one is that undervoting is still a big concern. And the fact that we are still waiting to find out who our next attorney general is going to be. And I think we can reasonably assert that it is going to be Chris Mays, thank goodness. But I saw something in the Republic yesterday that there were a significant number of people who skipped that race. We don't necessarily know who they were, whether it was predominantly Democrats or Republicans or independents, but I know we've been doing a lot of work as a party to try and mitigate against undervoting amongst Democrats, but I think we need to redouble our efforts with independents as well. I think the future also looks extraordinarily promising based on how younger voters broke for Democrats, not just in Arizona, but also within the rest of the country. But younger voters are very results oriented. They are some of the people who have been most dismayed with what Joe Manchin and unfortunately our own Kyrsten Sinema have done to derail the Democratic agenda in Washington. And so we need to do what we said we would do. And that needs to happen not just in Washington, but in Phoenix. All voters, not just younger ones, but I think this is a real characteristic of younger voters, want to see results. And that brings me to something that I've thought about with regard to most voters, which is that I think that most voters are pragmatists. They understand and accept the fact that there are certain roles that are best taken on by government, but they want those roles taken on with common sense, a real commitment to doing the public's good, and also respect for the public tax dollars entrusted to us. And with regard to that, I think that Governor-elect Hobbs and the Democrats in the legislature, and we were very fortunate to keep our current margins in the legislature. And now we have a Democratic governor, which is going to give us a lot more leverage. By the way, this was the first midterm election since 1934 that the president's party did not lose a single house of the legislature in any of the 50 states. That's extraordinary. And that's another thing that I think points to a really bright future for Democrats. But what I think that Katie Hobbs and our Democrats in the legislature need to focus on is everything that's been neglected by Republican governors since 2009, which is when Governor Napolitano left to become Obama's Homeland Security Secretary. Since then, we've had nothing but Republican governors, and we've had nothing but Republican majorities in the legislature, with the exception of beginning of the Napolitano administration, where we had a divided Senate, a 15-15 Senate. We've had nothing but Republican majorities in the legislature for over 30 years. And I really think that in areas like education, infrastructure, water policy, Governor-elect Hobbs and our colleagues in the legislature need to be very open about the fact that they're going to be taking on matters that have been neglected by Republicans while they've been in charge of the state for most of the last few decades. So those are some takeaways I have from the state. One other thing that's connected with the state is that the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, I think we all recognize, because incumbent members of the House pay into that they expect that saving incumbents is going to be their priority. But the amount of resources that we devoted to an open seat here in CD6, where polling by the Engel campaign indicated this was a very winnable race, and in CD1, where we had an extraordinarily strong challenger who had just come off a really outstanding campaign for the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors that he almost won against an incumbent in Jeb and Hodge, we neglected those two races. And I think we neglected open seats and challengers around the country. And that fact, coupled with Democrats getting out over their skis in New York State and really making a hash out of redistricting, I think we could have kept the House if we had been more strategic and less greedy in New York, and if we had done more to support people like Jeb and Hodge and Kirsten Engel around the country. So that's a long answer to your first question, Joe. I'll try to be more brief.
Rex, that was awesome. You really great view from 20,000 feet, and I loved it. You brought it home. I grew up in one of those congressional districts in New York State.
Oh, wow.
And it was way too, they really had we had a good candidate. The Republicans really had a very poor candidate, and the poor candidate still won. And I couldn't agree more. You know, Kirsten Engel was a great candidate. And we did, you know, the final analysis last I checked was she only lost by 1%. And I think there are some things to learn there too. With those rural counties of Graham, Greeley, Pinal, and Cochise, there's got to be a good strategy to work those counties better. And you're never going to have a plurality, but we could have done better, I think.
Well, I went to Kirsten's end of campaign party and yesterday afternoon, and I see from looking at the participant list that there are some other people on this call who were also part of that party, and she shared some statistics with all of us, not only about the extraordinary work that the campaign did with voter outreach, but also by how much they were outspent. It was when you take into account not just what the Siscomani campaign had on their own, but also what outside groups were spending, including Kevin McCarthy's House Majority PAC. Kirsten and her team were outspent about 10-1, and still made it a big fight.
Yep.
And it speaks to her qualities as a candidate, and it also speaks to what might have been if Democratic groups and special interest groups that support Democratic congressional candidates had been bigger players in this district.
Well, thanks for that. That really says a lot, and to finish as strong as she did is really commendable. That's great.
It is, and I will point out that Kirsten also said yesterday that we should hang on to our campaign signs. So I thought that was a great thing to hear her say.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, great. We're going to ask Mike Bryan to manage the chat room, and Rex, we already have some questions for you on county issues.
Wonderful.
So, Mike, would you like to go ahead and man the room?
Absolutely. Christina early asked a county question. She's wondering how the county is working to solve unhoused population issues, and you could probably throw in the affordability of housing there too.
You know, Christina, I really appreciate the question because last week, my colleagues and I voted unanimously, and it is rare to get a 5-0 vote out of the Board of Supervisors, even though we have a 4-1 Democratic majority on the board. You know, we're all different people who represent different parts of the county, and getting a 5-0 vote is something. So I brought some proposals before my colleagues last week, and we approved them unanimously. And I am, while we're talking, going to get into my documents so I can read them to you word for word. But the first one that we passed said, given the prevalence of criminal behavior that causes great hardships for our residents and businesses, the Board of Supervisors states that anyone who violates laws in place to protect public health and safety should be arrested and prosecuted. Anything that prevents the enforcement of our laws should be identified and removed. The board directs the county administration to work with the county attorney, sheriff, superior court, and any other involved parties to identify any barriers or impediments to effective enforcement or prosecution and report back to us with plans for addressing them. That was the first motion that we passed. The second one said the board directs county administration to devise a plan for making use of the Mission Annex as a site for the expansion of pretrial and probation services. One of the things that we hear from people on both the prosecutorial and law enforcement side is that a lot more needs to be done with pretrial and probation services in the county, and we need a place to do it. And the Mission Annex, which is adjacent to the Sheriff's Department, is the best place for that. We also passed this motion that said there is a need for comprehensive wraparound services that seek to address the root causes of homelessness. The board directs county administration to report to us on any current joint efforts being undertaken by county and city of Tucson staff to provide such services, any further opportunities for greater collaboration, and ways that private sector agencies can join in support of these efforts. And then the last motion that we passed said, the board directs county administration to fully evaluate and report back to us on any options for reallocating unexpended American Rescue Plan Act funds. That was the last package of pandemic relief funds that the county got to pay for any expenses associated with any of the items addressed in this motion. And like I said, all of those were passed unanimously. And I was really proud of my colleagues for the conversation that we had on the dais as we tried to come up with some things where we could move forward together. There were three other motions that I had dealing essentially with the county, perhaps getting into the area of providing shelter space itself, but we were not able to go there at this point. But I think that's an area we're going to address later. And then just to get to the second part of Christina's question, we also just reinvigorated and repurposed our housing commission. It is now called the Regional Affordable Housing Commission. Each supervisor gets to appoint 2 people, and there are also appointees from the county administrator. And we also have appointees from each of the incorporated jurisdictions from the county, and the city of Tucson, because of its size, will appoint 3 people to that commission. And its goal is to find ways to increase the stock of affordable housing within our region. And the first thing they're going to do is a comprehensive assessment of our needs in all areas of housing, not just affordable housing, but workplace housing, marketplace housing. So we're excited to see the work that commission is going to be doing. And it's going to be working in partnership with the city's commission, which was also recently repurposed.
Let's go ahead and call on Sandy Saltz. Sandy, you have your hand up. Let's ask your question.
Hey, Rich.
Hi, Sandy. Great seeing you and Maureen yesterday.
Absolutely. Party time there with Kirsten. If you were solo running the county, what is your personal #1 priority for the county to take on?
You know, Sandy, it won't surprise you to hear me say this, given that I was a teacher and an administrator within our public schools for almost 30 years. But I think what we're doing right now to provide scholarships to children whose families can't afford to pay for their preschool is the most important expenditure within our budget. And the reason I think that is because when you're investing in a child, the impact on them and their family is immeasurable. You may not know the result of the investment that you've made until years down the road. But when you're investing in as many children as this program is helping, and it helped close to 900 kids last year, and it's going to be right around 1,200 kids this year, you're also investing in the potential of our community and its future. And one of the reasons that this program is not only supported by K-12 and early childhood educators, but also by higher ed professionals and by people in the business community, we've had support from all the local chambers of commerce and the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, is because we're also working on the talent of our future workforce. And I also wanted to point out that if we are going to send more kids to preschool, we need to have more preschool capacity. And one of our most integral partners in this effort is United Way. And they have a program called Accelerate Quality, which is where United Way professionals are working with preschool providers so that they can meet the standards set down by the state of Arizona in terms of being a high quality early education provider.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Great question. Mike, we have some questions in the chat box, maybe?
We sure do. Rex Scott wants to switch back to statewide politics, and he's asking, how in the next year are we going to change the chronically adversarial and punitive state relationship with Pima County Board of Supervisors? And he thanks you for all your great work.
Oh, well, I think that the antipathy that you have seen towards Pima County historically in the legislature has been a partisan antipathy. Mm-hmm. Democratic members of the legislature have not had it in for Pima County. Frankly, it's been certain members of the other party, notably in the state Senate. But here's what I think. Now that we've got a Democratic governor for the first time since 2009, there's a 16-14 Republican majority in the Senate, a 31-29 Republican majority in the House. The people who are going to really make an impact in the legislature are not strident partisans who maybe want to go after one of the 15 counties. It's going to be people who have the ability to not just reach across the aisle, but maybe reach back into their own caucus and form the kind of working coalitions that you're going to need with a Democratic governor and close margins in the two houses. So I don't think that is likely to happen the way it has in the past for those reasons. And I also think that there are members in the Republican caucus, notably Southern Arizona Republican members like Senator Gowan, who are working to have a good relationship with all the counties. I'm the county's representative to the State County Supervisors Association, and we had our legislative policy summit recently. It was hosted by us in Santa Cruz County, and Senator Gowan was there every day, interacting with all of our members, regardless of parties. So I'm hopeful that is a thing of the past.
That's encouraging. Several people have asked about how redistricting has affected the outcome of this particular election and what we need to do perhaps to get ahead of that, the issue next time around for the 2030 round of redistricting.
Well, I'll tell you, give credit where credit is due. Governor Ducey stacked the commission from which comes the names for the independent chair of the redistricting commission. As we know, there are 2 Democrats there, and there are 2 Republicans. They're appointed, if I remember correctly, by legislative leadership for both parties. And then you have a 5th member who's an independent, but their names are generated by, God, I can't remember the name of the commission.
Backup.
Thank you. I knew, Mike, I knew you would know. Thank you. You got my back on that. And Ducey stacked that commission years before they were going to make that appointment. And so, quite honestly, I mean, I don't envy Chair Newberg, her position, but there were so many times, and the creation of LD17 is a great example, where she was much more likely to side with the Republican members than the Democratic members. So I think we need to be, quite honestly, maybe not as ruthless as Governor Ducey was, but we need to be getting ready for 2030. And that component is something that I am sure has not escaped the attention of Katie Hobbs.
At least fully staff CACA in order to allow us to do some actual nominations as opposed to, ringers.
There you go.
Finally, we have a question here from Gail Canamares, who wants to know how we can educate and maybe what we need to do to educate voters on the importance of the ACC to our future here in Arizona. And she took Sandra Kennedy losing her seat and Laura Kuby not getting in very hard.
You know, and Lauren and Sandra were just omnipresent on the campaign trail. I swear every candidate event that I either went to or took part in online, one or both of them was there. I think it's difficult. It's difficult when, again, you're running clean elections, and I think both of them did. I know Lauren did. Because I went to an event for her and she made sure to say at the beginning, hey, I'm not raising any money here because I've gotten all my clean elections contributions. I think that was a big hurdle for her and Sandra to overcome. And the other thing was, just like the state treasurer's race, the Republicans really downplayed any connections with Trump or election denialism or being anti-choice. And of course, in state treasurer and corporation commission races, those issues aren't as prevalent, but those were the races where you saw the biggest votes for Republican candidates were state treasurer and corporation commission. I honestly think that the corporation commission is probably likely, now that I think it's a 4-1 Republican commission, the only Democratic commissioner is Anna Tovar. I think they're going to get out over their skis and they are going to make some decisions that are going to damage our need to take on climate change in a holistic way, that are going to look like it's just the APS run ACC, and that are not going to be effective in terms of consumer protection. So hopefully they're going to give us a solid record that we can run against the next time. And I believe the next time there'll be 3 seats up. So
yes. In 24, there'll be 3 seats up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe?
Okay, is that it, Mike?
For now, yeah. If
Yeah, great.
I don't want to
Appreciate
put
it.
on camera, just put them in the chat.
Okay, Steve Early, you have your hand up. You have a question?
Thanks for being with us. And my question is kind of generic, and I think I know the answer, but if you as a citizen of the district were having a problem with PAC, who would you turn to?
Yeah, Steve, you're talking about the Pima Animal Control Center?
Correct.
Okay, the first thing I would do is call them directly, but if you don't reach anybody at PAC, I would call your supervisor because the constituent service is one of the things that we spend most of our time on. And if you call whoever your supervisor is, and that supervisor then contacts the Pima Animal Control Center or pretty much any department within the county, that immediately becomes a priority for that department because they want to get back to the supervisor and her or his staff and say, yeah, we've resolved this issue for your constituent.
Thank you.
You bet, Steve. Thank you. And if you are a District 1 constituent, please be in touch with us if we can be of help with that.
All righty, I would.
All right.
Great. George Beverly, how are you doing? You have a question? And you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Rex. I totally agree with everything you said in that opening statement about District 1. I went to one of his rallies and he didn't get a lot of exposure. And it was one of the candidates that I thought were there to win it, but we fell a little short about it. But
talking about Jevin Hodge?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just an outstanding candidate.
Yeah, he would have been the first Black representative in that district.
As you probably know, George, he almost knocked off an incumbent Maricopa County Republican supervisor in 2020, and that election needed some additional days of vote counting before they could declare a winner.
Correct. And I think that the Democratic Party needs to do a little bit more. And that was one of my questions, was what can we do to help candidates in red districts bolster up their appearance and also their knowability around that. And the second question I have is what can we do to help people re-enter into the workforce to get into any type of education in our communities? I'm not sure if you guys have a program like that to help people re-enter into the workforce, but it's important to get people that are local, especially people of color, to get in there, because you were talking about the preschool. It's important to get people of color into the education departments. So
No
what
question.
can the county do for that?
So let me, with regard to your first question, George, I think, as I said earlier, we need to pay as much attention to open seats and strong challengers in winnable districts as we do to protecting incumbents. I think that needs to be a higher priority when we are, for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and also for the state Democratic Party. In whatever capacity it has to be of support. But I think we also need to listen to people on the ground in those districts. My campaign consultant was also Kirsten Engel's campaign consultant. And what I heard from this gentleman and his team was that they were telling the national folks, look at our polling, look at what we are hearing on the ground and seeing on the ground. And I think a lot of times folks in DC are looking at their metrics that they have and not paying attention to the people on the ground. And then with regard to your second question, George, there is an absolutely outstanding organization in Pima County. It's not run by the county, but it is supported by the county. In fact, the county is one of its biggest financial supporters, known as JobPath. And I would encourage you to go on the JobPath website. It is a organization that partners with Pima Community College and provides support for students who are trying to get their degrees or who are trying to get some kind of industry certification. It provides them with not only tuition and book support, but sometimes support for living expenses, health insurance, so that they can stay focused on being a student. Their track record, and if you go on the JobPath website, you'll see some of their data. Their track record since they started in the 1990s is extraordinary. And Pima County is one of the biggest supporters of JobPath. That is another thing where you have found unanimous support from the Board of Supervisors in backing JobPath. And that predates this board. I believe the previous board supported JobPath unanimously, with maybe the exception of my predecessor, but I don't know that any of us are too surprised by that. Thanks, George.
Okay. That's great. So looks like any other questions, Mike, in the chat room?
Yeah, we've got a couple more. Sue Heck says she's a newbie here in Tucson and to Tucson politics. She'd like to get a little background on what the Board of Supervisor does and how it relates to other parts of government.
Oh, thank you, Sue, because one of the things that I found when I was running for this office is that people are not only often unaware of what the Board of Supervisors does, they're often unaware about just how impactful and large Pima County is. Pima County has over 7,000 employees working in dozens of departments. In this most recent fiscal year, we had a $1.9 billion budget. Now that budget's a little larger than it normally is because of pandemic relief funds that we are still spending. But even in a regular year, it's usually around 1.5 billion. And that budget is probably the most significant task of the Board of Supervisors. We set the budget not only for the departments that are run by appointed officials like the Parks Department or the Transportation Department, but the row officers, the independently elected officials like the sheriff, the assessor, the attorney, the recorder, their budgets also come through the Board of Supervisors. We set the property tax rates for both the primary and secondary property taxes. The primary property tax is the main property tax that the county uses to fund its operations. And then there are 3 secondary property taxes that are for specific purposes. One of them funds the Regional Flood Control District. A second one funds the Library District. And a third one funds all of our long-term debt. However, all of the county's long-term debt is going to be paid off, I believe, by fiscal year 27-28. So that tax is being reduced over time as that debt is paid off. We hire only one person, and that person who we hire is the county administrator. And then the county administrator hires deputy county administrators, and she and the deputy county administrators hire department heads, and they're responsible for the day-to-day operation of county government. We are a policy-making board, and the responsibility of the county administrator is to carry out board policy. I have 3 people who work in my staff: Cammie Evans, Kate Hiller, and Kim Challender. And we spend most of our time not only researching policy matters that are going to come before the board, but as some of you know, and I made reference to this when I was answering Steve's question about PAC, we spend a lot of time dealing with constituent service. And that's the nature of representative democracy. I'm your representative on the Board of Supervisors. If you call me or my staff with some kind of problem with county government, it's our responsibility to get county government to work on whatever problem or concern or complaint that you have. So I hope that answers your question, Sue.
That was pretty much a university level course on county government. Thanks, Rex.
Well, I was a social studies teacher, so I had a little prior preparation as well.
I do have a question of my own. Now that we're looking at having a Democratic governor here in Arizona, what are the biggest pain points or opportunities that you see that are going to be relieved or enabled for Pima County by having a Democratic governor finally?
Well, I think not only having a Democratic governor, but having a Democratic governor who was a member of both the Arizona House and the Arizona Senate. So Katie Hobbs knows that for years, the state has shifted costs onto counties. And this is a concern for all of my colleagues on the board and for all of my colleagues in the other 14 counties. The amount of money that we have to incorporate into our budgets each year because the state has shifted costs to us, costs associated with both long-term and short-term medical care, costs associated with running the court system, costs associated with running the juvenile justice system. It runs into the tens of millions of dollars for Pima County. So we're certainly hoping that that's something that Katie Hobbs is going to remember. I know the County Supervisors Association is going to remind her of that if she's forgotten. So that is something that we really hope that she will take on. As all of you know from my last visit to you, we also are hoping that the state will repeal the preemption statute that prevents us as a Board of Supervisors from taking any kind of local action to deal with gun safety or otherwise preventing gun violence. Again, that is Arizona Revised Statute 13-3108. And we're going to be talking about this in an executive session of the board on December 6th, because we have our memorandum from the county attorney on how we might address that statute. But what would be great is if the legislature and the governor said, you know, we're not going to continue to prevent local governments from doing what some of their counterparts around the country are able to do and take local action to address gun violence and gun safety. We're just going to repeal that statute. That might be a bit of a Pollyannish wish on my part, but it's more, more likely to think about with a Democratic governor.
Is that legal memorandum from Lauren confidential to the board, or is
it is for now? Yes, we would have to. We just received it last week, and one of the things that we'll have to talk about in executive session is removing attorney-client privilege from that document. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Andrea, your question.
Okay. Hi, Rex. Thank you. It's good to see you. And
Good to see you. We saw each other election night.
yes, we did. Yes, we did. I'm so heartbroken about Kirsten Engel.
Mhm.
And almighty God, 1%. She was tanking in every other county except Pima. And I guess I kind of have a twofold question. What can be done about this? That's an intelligent question. And it's like, we talk about, you say most people, they don't like the nastiness and the extremism, but look at the results. It breaks down to half or almost half. I had no idea there were that many people in the world who could like Carrie Lake, but I don't know what can be, and I guess more specifically, you were talking about, I know one solution you offered was get ready for the next redistricting committee. How do we do that? How can I do something if possible? And thank you. Oh, dog.
Well, I think letting I think letting Governor-elect Hobbs, when she becomes governor, know that we're hoping that in the time that she has, and certainly we hope she's reelected in 2026, that she looks at that commission that Mike was referring to, from whence comes the independent chair of the redistricting commission. But then I think we also need to just continue what we're doing to grow our party. One of the things that I've been really appreciative of as a candidate myself is how I've been able to count on not just the county party, but maybe even more significantly, the LDs, the legislative district organizations for volunteers. And I also think we need to make sure that we are competing fully in the swing districts that we now have. I am not an advocate for the single shot strategy. There are 5 or 6, I believe, of the 30 districts in the state that are known as swing districts. And I think we need to run full slates in those districts. I think we need to run full slates in most of the districts, because then you're getting the Republicans to divert resources that they might be using in other places. That's what they had to do with Kirsten. She was running such a great campaign despite being outspent 10-1 that they had to start plowing more money into CD6 that they probably wanted to put into other districts around the country. So those would be some of my answers to your question, Andrea, and I hope whatever you're cooking is good.
Okay, Lucy Messing, you have a question.
Hi, Rex. Good to see you.
Hi, Lucy. How are you, my friend?
I'm really well, thank you.
All right.
I was going to ask about an update on the preschool program, how it's going and what we can look for next year. There's, it was so important to get that off the ground, and I'm really excited about it. I just want to make sure it's going strong.
Well, it is going great, Lucy. We helped close to 900 kids last year. The goal is to help right around 1,200 kids this year. Just as one example, Amphitheater has, going into this school year, 10 preschools. 10 preschools. And that is, according to their superintendent, enough to support half a kindergarten cohort. So that's just extraordinary. And I think with efforts like that by our K-12 partners, and the K-12 districts are all expanding, with Amphi probably being the most notable example, but also the private providers, all of them working with Accelerate Quality, that United Way program that I mentioned earlier when I was responding to Sandy's question. We're going to not only be able to help every kid, but also have the capacity within the preschool provider community to help them. We are using, and I didn't say this when I was answering Sandy's question earlier, we are using American Rescue Plan Act funds for the first 3 years of this program. But moving forward, we were given permission by the legislature and yes, Governor Ducey, by a bill that actually passed the legislature almost unanimously. We were given permission, in fact, every county has this permission, to use their secondary tax that funds the library district to help pay for quality early childhood education. So we're already building a reserve for when ARPA funds run out. And, you know, not to be too self-indulgent, but the most important thing is that we always have at least 3 supervisors who support this program.
Okay, we have a question now from Steve Yoziak. And Steve, you ready to go? Unmute yourself.
Yes, I just, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I just cannot emphasize enough the failure of, first, the Democrats for not being more aggressive when it came to redistricting. You know, we did not challenge anything that the Citizens Redistricting Commission did. You know, after they made their decision, we could have filed lawsuits. We could have, like, you know, challenged their decisions on some of these districts a little bit more. I mean, and then an utter failure on the commission itself. You had 5 of the 9 congressional districts in the state that were already predetermined already, you know, because of the huge advantage that one party or the other had going into the vote. And then 28 of the 60, 28 of the 90 legislators, you know, 1/3 of them also already predetermined, you know, didn't have a challenger even, you know, going into the general election. And this is just something that really needs to be emphasized in such a big way. And I know that you mentioned, you know, maybe not being as aggressive as Ducey was, but I think we should even be more aggressive than he was. I mean, Katie Hobbs.
I said ruthless.
Sorry, Steve,
ruthless.
is there a question in there? I'm not following that.
So this is more of a comment than anything, but I just wanted to say that we just really need to emphasize this a lot more, and we need to, like, you know, be more involved in the decisions that Katie makes when it's her turn to appoint the members of the various commissions for judges and for the commission.
Really well said, Steve, and I appreciate you pointing to the fact that competitiveness is often given short shrift when compared to the other factors. And I know that the commissioners will often say that's because it's not supposed to be given as much weight as communities of interest or equal size of districts. But I think when people voted for clean elections, they voted mostly because they wanted to see competitive races. I, however, will say that regardless of the work of that commission, until we have a system in place like ranked choice voting that is going to make people feel that they have a voice in both primary and general elections, regardless of their party affiliation, we're not going to see the level of voter participation and competitiveness that all of us want.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to say thank you for everything today. This has been a great discussion.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you.
Well, we're kind of coming up on the hour. We started a little bit late.
I think Jeannie has a question.
Oh, Jeannie. Yes, Jeannie,
Hey,
go
Rex. Hey, Rex, it's really good to see you,
Hi,
my friend.
Jeannie. Good to see you.
You know, you do so much for your constituents. I'm wondering, is there anything we can do for you?
You know, thank you, Jeannie, and I hope everything's okay in Precinct 30. As Jeannie knows, my wife and I did live in Precinct 30 until the end of March, and then we moved into Precinct 112. But I think the most important thing, Jeannie, that folks can do for me, because you're the eyes and the ears in your communities, is when you're hearing about something that you think I need to know about as your supervisor, let me know about it.
Okay.
Great, great. And Mike, any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to cap this off with noting, boy, Rex, you sure would make a great superintendent of public instruction for.
Oh, wow, such a deal.
Well, Mike, I am planning to be a candidate for reelection in 2024, 100%. And if
That election doesn't come up until 26, I'll remember.
I know, but if I were fortunate enough to be reelected by the people of District 1, I would commit to them to serve my full term.
Honorable man. I would.
Well, and I'm a very proud constituent, Rex. So I'm
Thank
very
you.
happy to have you.
Thank you, Jim.
So Rex,
Enduring
thank you so much
anthem.
for giving your time, and
Thank
it
you.
was a wonderful program. We'd love to have you back soon if we
You
can
got
make
it.
it. Everybody, you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Blessings and warm wishes to everyone.